Shalom, and welcome to Christians with Torah, the Beit Tehillah Community Podcast. We believe the Torah is relevant for our lives today, God's teachings and instructions. You may very well be part of the first generation to be born again, filled with the Holy Spirit, and have the Torah, a Christian with Torah. Join us as we honor the living God through the study of His Word, topical conversations, and interviews with special guests. Please welcome our hosts, Pastor Nick Plummer and Ryan Cabrera.
Shalom, everybody, and welcome to Christians with Torah. I'm Ryan Cabrera, your co-host, and I am here in the land of Israel on, of all places, the mountain of blessing in Har Bracha. And let me just tell you, I'm very excited to be coming to you today from this place specifically to talk about this topic. And so today we're talking about Yom Teruah and the 10 days of awe, and I have what I would consider an expert, but I don't know if he would be so bold as to consider himself an expert. But I have Avraham Hermon here with me. Tell us, how do I introduce you, right? I think there's many things. Like I actually referred to you today as the International Man of Mystery. Of all things.
Well, I don't know if I can live up to that title, but I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've been living here in Har Bracha in the Shomron for the last 20 years, and I'm an Israeli by choice. I grew up in the U.S., in Pennsylvania, in California, and New Jersey. And after spending childhood there and being exposed to Israel, I decided that I need to make my future in the homeland of my people, of my family, and return to Israel. So after studying here for 2 years, I went back to the U.S., got a university degree, came back, and that was my first aliyah, moving to Israel. And then my second aliyah, my second moving up, was moving from the coastal plain in Israel to here in Har Bracha, the Shomron. And my day job is that I'm a patent attorney. I'm a partner in a patent firm specializing in pharmaceuticals and biotechnology and chemistry. And I have the pleasure of being involved with Hayovel and I would say teaching on a regular basis to volunteers who come here to Israel. But in addition to teaching, I think I'm learning a lot because I hear some really interesting questions and I get to talk about all sorts of different interesting topics and see things from a Christian viewpoint and understand a little bit about where people are coming from all over the world, and actually see people coming and helping volunteering here in Israel, and that's very encouraging for me. So That's a little bit about me. We have I'm happily married. We have 7 kids that we're raising here in Har Bracha, aged 7 to 18. And in terms of shofar, you see a little bit of the collection that I have here. A lot of this is homemade. I made the shofar. I'm sort of an accidental shofar collector. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit later, about how this collection was born and where it came from. But I'd be happy to talk about shofar. I've been blowing shofar for the last 25 years or so, and I feel very connected to shofar, and especially this holiday, Rosh Hashanah, coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good segue. So when I said International Man of Mystery, we were talking, you're a patent attorney, right? And you say pharmaceuticals and biotechnology and chemistry, which means not only are you an attorney, which takes a decent amount of schooling and practice and expertise to get there, but also a chemist, you said?
Yeah.
So in order to understand the things that you're writing patents for, right?
Yeah.
You have to have the technology background from a chemistry standpoint, right? Or science background. So that's a lot in and of itself. And then, many of these shofar, which I know we'll get into later, because I feel like I've seen your presentation one other time, you actually made these. And then you're a runner, right?
Yeah.
An avid runner. Marathon runners. See, there's a level, and then there's another level. You know what I mean? To everything in life. And I think one of the things I'm noticing about you from the very limited interactions that we've had thus far is that if there's a way to do things, that you're gonna do the next level of whatever it is.
I hope so. I think that part of what fascinates me about shofar is that I'm into the do-it-yourself and craft aspects of. And the intersection between that and Judaism. So I've also learned how to do kosher ritual slaughter for birds, and also learned how to write scribery, how to write a Torah scroll and tefillin, and for both of my sons, now I have a second son who's going to be starting his tefillin journey, starting putting on tefillin in about a month or so. So I wrote for him his tefillin also. So for me, that's a big accomplishment. I'm really connected. I guess every person has to find those parts of the Torah that speak to him. And the parts that speak to me, I think those are the ones that you can really do hands-on craft type applications. So that's the outcome is here in front of you.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. Well, again, I appreciate you being here with me. The big topic for today is Yom Teruah or Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Teruah means day of blowing. Is that right?
Yeah.
So it's not Yom Shofar, right? So why do you think the Torah says Yom Teruah instead of Yom Shofar?
So it's interesting. I didn't really think about this specific question so much, but there's an urban legend that the Eskimos have 7 ways of talking about snow, because that's what they live with. That's their environment, So Hebrew, the Torah in its original, has a lot of different words that talk about this concept of making a blast, right? You have Tekiah, you have Teruah, you have Shofar, you have Yovel, right? Even the word Yovel is a reference to Shofar.
And Yovel meaning Jubilee, like where we're at today.
It also means Jubilee, right?
Okay.
And, in Exodus, when it talks about the, Mount Sinai and the holiness of Mount Sinai, it says, and I'm going to quote the verse in its original, Bimshoch HaYovel Hema Ya'lu Bahar, which means when you hear the blast, right? When you hear that sound and it's referred to as Yovel.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the same word as Jubilee. Okay. And there's a connection also.
Because there is a blast that's done on.
Right. Jubilee is also associated with freeing of slaves.
Sure.
And blast of shofar, in gathering of people, returning to your source land, to the land that's yours.
Okay. All right. So there's a lot there. So let's back up and think. I think there's, and you may even want to pull it up, in Leviticus 23. I know that you'll have a better version. The original is always better than the translation. Amen. So Leviticus 23:2.
Okay.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So this is Leviticus that talking about the holidays, and I guess I could read Leviticus 23:2, which reads, "Daber bnei Israel v'amarta lehem," speak to the people of Israel and say to them, "Moadei Adonai, asher tikru'u otam mikrai kodesh, ele hem moadai," the times of God, of the Lord, which you shall call holy days. These are my days. These are my times. And then the next verse.
Sure.
3, Sheshet yamim te'aseh melacha, uv'yom hashvi'i Shabbat Shabbaton, mikra kodesh, kol melacha lo ta'asu, Shabbat hi l'Adonai b'chol moshvotechem. 6 days you shall do constructive work, and on the 7th day is a Sabbath, which is called holy. Any constructive work should not be done. It is a Sabbath to God in all of your dwelling places.
So my understanding from, I've been exploring the Torah now for about 10 years from a Christian perspective. And I look at that and I get the impression that God is instituting and inviting the people that would be attracted to him and following him to meet with him. Is that, like we say feasts in English, and I don't think the word there is really feasts, right? You said it times instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if there's a real reference to the concept of feasting, but at the same time, I do agree with you that there is this element of meeting. And right now, we're in this strange sort of situation now. The Jews are returning to their land. They're in this process. We're seeing Jewish independence in the land of Israel the last 70 years. But at the same time, Jewish life is incomplete without our holy temple. And when you read the Torah, you get a sense of, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's all happening at the temple, right? And
especially in Leviticus.
Yeah. Especially having to do with the holidays. And we had a special commandment of being seen before God.
Sure.
3 times a year. And maybe even we talked today about the covenant between God and people of Israel. And maybe even part of that of commandment of coming to the temple and being seen before God and rejoicing there is actually even a renewing of that covenant, or a sort of refreshing of that covenant that was made. Being able to say, hey, I'm connected to the people of Israel, I'm connected to the God of Israel, and I'm connected to this place, Jerusalem, where the holy presence rests, and getting the spiritual batteries recharged. And those would be the three main holidays of Sukkot, Shavuot, and Pesach. I said them in the wrong order.
Sure.
They start from Passover, but I'm just thinking about Sukkot, the Sukkot holiday coming up.
Yeah.
And the Shavuot holiday and the Passover holiday. These are the three main holidays where there's a commandment, special commandment to be seen before God, bring sacrifice before God. And I know today it's a little bit harder for us to realize. In other words, we're accustomed to eating meat, most of us, and we're kind of removed from that whole process of understanding where that came from. Because,
meaning the slaughter.
Yeah. And, sacrifice. Right? For us, sacrifice means something else. Sacrifice on a very simple level means taking an animal and sacrificing it, and basically understanding, hey, I should have been there on a certain sense, and I am giving a part of myself, or I'm sacrificing a little bit of my own wealth or my own property to God, and this is distributed. It's burnt on the altar, or it's distributed among the priests and enjoyed by the priests. Some of it might be enjoyed by the owners as well. And we're very far removed from that. It's hard for us to relate to it. But that's a big part of the feasts as well.
Yeah, it's just so funny how many, you talk, right? And your perspective makes my brain go on, bunny trails of questions that, I want to stay focused on, obviously, the holidays. But, just what you said about the sacrifices and how we're removed from it, and how in some way that should or could have been us, right, instead of the animal. I think in my mindset, the way that I've always looked at it from a biblical perspective, sacrificing, is that it's because of our sin, right? But there's almost, because we get to partake of the flesh of the animal, right, that it could have been, reversed, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
It never even crossed my mind.
Well, the truth is there are a lot of different types of sacrifices, and if we were to have a podcast dedicated to Leviticus, podcast episode on Leviticus, we could spend a lot of time talking about it, because there are those sacrifices that are completely burnt, there are those that are brought for sin, there are those that are brought out of thanks for God, there are those that are brought by the community as a whole.
Right.
And there are those that are brought by, everyone contributes to the daily sacrifices or to the holiday sacrifices that are brought in the temple. But interestingly, Leviticus, this chapter 23, is not really focused on the special sacrifices of the holidays so much as Numbers 28, which also is another account of the holidays. But there it's really focused on, okay, what are the special offerings that are brought there? And here it is focused on the holidays themselves. What special commandments are there of the holidays? And we know Rosh Hashanah, which is coming up, is Yom Teruah. And I think that a special connection for us of Yom Teruah is, what we have here. This is, in fact, an example of a ram's horn. Why do Jews prefer to blow the shofar? From most communities, including my community, we prefer to use a shofar like this. This is the shofar that I'm going to use on Rosh Hashanah next week.
Okay.
In the community and in our prayers, the early morning prayers, I will be the one who's blowing the shofar there, using this. Why specifically a ram's horn? And I think this connects to the idea that we were saying. Abraham went to give the ultimate sacrifice, his future,
right,
his legacy, his whole worldview was against human sacrifice, and God says you have to sacrifice your son. He's willing to do that.
Yeah.
He's willing to go ahead and say, basically, I'm removing myself because I'm basically cutting off my descendants. There aren't going to be any more because I'm sacrificing them. All my ideology, everything I've been preaching, against child sacrifice, I'm breaking that.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and do it. And God says, no, you have done enough. You showed a willingness to sacrifice your son. And Abraham is like, I need to do something. And he finds, miraculously, there's a ram happens to be right there, right?
Caught in the thicket, yeah.
Caught in the thicket. It just happened to be. At the same time, there's a ram caught in the thicket. He takes the ram and he slaughters that instead. And we say, we are connected to this legacy of Abraham. We want to also sacrifice, right? We are willing to give God everything. But we don't. We understand that his command is not to give us, not to give everything. And we conjure up that image of Abraham by blowing the shofar. That's one of the things that we're thinking about when we blow the shofar. There are so many different things we're thinking about.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be able to cover some of them here.
Yeah, for sure. So then Leviticus 23, we read those first few verses. This is an introduction to the invitations that God's going to give to his appointed times throughout the year. And you have the spring feasts, so to speak, or the spring appointed times, Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits, and then all the way up to what? Shavuot, to the Feast of Weeks, or what we would call Pentecost.
And those are really very connected, right? Because there's no even date for the Shavuot Pentecost holiday.
Right.
It's just count 7 weeks from this holiday, and 7 weeks of 7 days, and you'll get to this holiday.
Yeah.
So these are two parts of one unit, one big holiday, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, so in mainstream Christianity, where I, started my faith journey, there's this thing called Pentecost that I had no understanding of what it was. Even though, like in the New Testament, it says the introduction to Pentecost, it says the day of Pentecost had fully come. Well, it never occurred to me what does that mean, the day of Pentecost had fully come? I'm reading the events that happened after that statement, thinking, oh, this is the event. But 1,500 years prior, there was a Pentecost, right, that had happened at Sinai. And even the word Pentecost meaning 50, it's like, 50 days from what? These things that, until you start to dig in, right? Almost like there's breadcrumbs that are left that for those that are seeking, they're going to follow them and find the answers, right? But if you're not seeking, then you're going to kind of glaze over it, so to speak. So then you have all of the summer now, and the summer is where I guess traditionally we get ourselves into a pickle. Right? There's a time where if left to our own devices, right, we need to be looking forward or whatnot. We come to this time of the month of Elul, which is the time that we're in right now. And I mentioned to you before we started recording that I had done what I would call a devotional. I don't know what Rabbi Simon Jacobson, who wrote the book 60 Days, would call it. Pastor Nick and I actually had done that 1 year together, and it's just a perspective of walking through Elul, right? Teshuvah, the season of Teshuvah, and then walking through, Tishri, the month of Tishri, and it's one of those times I think in life, because I think sometimes you drink from a fire hose and there's only so much that you can assimilate, right? So I got so much all at once that it'll take me probably years to go back and really absorb the bits and pieces, but I'm interested in your perspective, an Orthodox Jew living in the land of Israel, prophecies being fulfilled all around you, every day. You sneeze and, oh, look, there's a fulfilled prophecy. And, you drop your keys and, oh, look, another fulfilled prophecy. Just the things that I'm walking around and I'm picking up pottery, off of the ground, just right over here on the hill behind us, and I'm just and I'm thinking to myself, well, I wonder who had this pottery, what's the story? Because you could look at it as, oh, there's all these shards, there's so many around, but there's a story behind, each one of these things. Was this used in a feast or whatever? So, back to, coming back to Yom Teruah, how do we, you have this month of Teshuvah. Has the month of Teshuvah always been part of the fall feasts, or is this something that was implemented later on somebody came up with, hey, we have these summer months where we have, the 3 weeks of affliction and the 9th of Av and all these things. Maybe we should take some time before we get to the fall feast to really prepare ourselves. Was there a time where it didn't exist and then it was created, and is there any history behind that?
I don't really know what the history is behind the month of Elul itself and it being connected to the feasts and Rosh Hashanah and the New Year, but it makes sense because you can't possibly get ready for such a great day just the day before and say, okay, it's time. It really needs a lot of preparation. I'm not just talking about myself because I need to prepare myself and practice blowing the shofar, but I think regular participants in the prayer, if you're doing Rosh Hashanah right, you need to be really thinking about it. You need to be going through this process even beforehand. But we understand that Elul, the month of Elul, is really a sort of an acronym. And a little bit like what you mentioned previously, Ani ledodi v'dodi li, which is the verse in Song of Solomon, which addresses, I am for my beloved, and my beloved is to me. That's Aleph, Lamed, Vav. Lamed, those are the letters of Elul spell out this sentence. If you take the very first letter of every word in the sentence, then you get Elul. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. A special time of closeness, and essentially saying, okay, this is the time where you have to think about what you're doing. We start also, our custom is to blow the shofar every day of the month of Elul. Not a large amount of shofar blowing, 3 blasts after the prayers on mornings. There are various customs as to special prayers that are said before, at dawn, very early in the morning, or late at night, and after midnight, that we actually start tonight, and some customs start tonight, the week before Rosh Hashanah, with these prayers. Some customs are to start the whole month of Elul. The Sephardic custom is that from the very beginning of Elul until Yom Kippur, until basically 40 days, with the exception of Sabbath. There are these special prayers. Wake up early in the morning to say these prayers. So there's definitely an ancient tradition of Elul, which is not biblically mandated. It's not mentioned in the Bible that Elul is a special month or connected at all to Teshuvah. The Torah teaches that you could do Teshuvah at really any time, but this is a time that's especially ripe for it.
Yeah, I got a book somebody turned me on to, because Teshuvah, just the season of Elul, has been something that I've always been I say always, since I discovered it, so to speak, which is going to be probably 5 years ago or so. I've been very interested in it. And so there's this book, Sharei Teshuvah, which is Gateways of Teshuvah, Gateways of Repentance, and Teshuvah being the concept of turning back to God, right? I think there's a Greek word in the New Testament that Christians use that has more of a mindset change, but we, I think, understand for some reason that it's still a turning to God, right? A teshuvah, to turn back to God. And what is some things that somebody would be doing during the month of Elul? You mentioned some things that are like prayers. You even mentioned 3 shofar blasts. I was interested kind of because you specifically said 3. Is there a reason that it's 3 blasts, or?
Yeah, well, I think that's the basic unit of shofar. And we can even talk about that if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
That we have 2 different concepts of shofar. One is called tekiah, which is one solid blast. Another one is called teruah, which is a broken blast. And these combinations make up our shofar blowing. Okay. Question is really, what does this broken blast sound like? There are 3 different possibilities. It could be a broken blast that's 3 parts. Could be it's a really very broken blast that's 9 parts. Okay, or at least 9 parts. And it could be a combination of both of them, 3 and then 9 together. So we're not even sure. I guess the product of 2 long exiles, one after the destruction of the first temple, and the second that we're still in the process of coming out of, is sort of we're a little bit distanced to exactly what the main tradition was. We have an idea, but different communities do different things. So the basic unit of blowing the shofar is first a tekiah, solid blast, then a broken blast, and then a solid blast again. We could demonstrate here.
Sure. So you said tekiah, teruah, and then tekiah again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But the teruah itself,
I was going to say, because it's Yom Teruah, so that's what I'm wondering about.
Yeah. So the teruah itself is the broken blast, and what does that represent? And there are so many different explanations, but one explanation is as follows: that when you cry, you sob, and it's broken. Right?
Yeah.
And it sounds sometimes like like that, and that's really broken.
Yeah,
I know. That's the teruah. The tekiah is the solid blast. One distinct solid blast that's long.
Okay.
Now, when we call out to God and we are repenting, then you obviously have that element of crying. But there's a teaching that teaches something a little bit deeper, that when there's a reason for starting with its solid blast and having the broken blast and then having the solid blast, because it's sort of a representation of the world. Why do we want to represent the world? Because we are celebrating now on Yom Teruah the anniversary of the creation of man. That's part of why we understand that today is the day of judgment as well, because the day comes when man was created, a year has gone by. Let's see where's mankind up to. And the Talmud teaches us that all of mankind goes before God and is judged by God on this day. So what do we want to represent when we're representing the world? When we have one solid blast, then we go back in history and back in time to the time of its creation, even before the creation, when there was nothing else and there was only oneness in the world. Only God. That's one solid, huge blast, clear blast that's not broken at all. And the creation of the world all of a sudden brings into it physicality, multiplicity of objects and of forces. And you have, if you will, even an idea of possibility of thinking, okay, there are a lot of different forces in the world. Maybe God is no longer with us. It's God set things into motion, God forbid, right?
Yeah, God forbid.
And there's now nature, and there's this God there's this sun god and moon god, and everything else is controlling various things. And this mistaken idea, obviously, of multiple powers in the world. And that brokenness can bring into confusion. That's the brokenness of the creation of the world.
Yeah.
But then, you go start at this really high point of creation. You go down to the physicality and brokenness and maybe even hiddenness of God.
Wow.
But then our goal in this world, after man is created, is to bring us back up, to bring the whole world back up to the point of oneness, of unity of God. But now it's along with the creation. In other words, fixing the creation, removing the hiddenness of God, bringing to light all the possibility of showing oneness to the whole entire world. According to our opinion, Rosh Hashanah is not a holiday for Jews only. It's a day of judgment for mankind, ever since mankind was created. And we have to go through that process of fixing. Sometimes the brokenness is broken into 3 parts. Sometimes it's really broken into 9 parts, and sometimes broken into so many different parts. So our shofar blowing on Rosh Hashanah combines this element of 3. Okay? So we do this during Elul, this basic unit of 3.
So one of the questions that I have just listening to you say this is, during the month of Elul, you're blowing the shofar daily to prepare for blowing the shofar.
That's correct. We're blowing the shofar daily, but in a way to awaken ourselves, because we hear the shofar and it awakens us.
Yeah.
And we it's a call to proclaim that God is king over the whole world. There are so many different ideas having to do with the shofar, and I've mentioned a few of them.
Yeah.
What we have here is, we're not using trumpets. Why don't we use a trumpet? Trumpet is a nice sound, right?
Yeah.
These are okay. I guess it depends on who blows them, right? And it depends on the different types of shofar that there are. But why do we use an animal's horn? And one idea that I thought of was as follows. Let's just think about the animal kingdom and what these shofarot are used for. So we have here a kudu horn. This kudu horn was, someone gave it to me. Someone sent it to me from South Africa. And someone who had volunteered here and heard my shofar presentation.
Wow, that's cool.
And it wasn't made into a shofar. And it came a few days before Rosh Hashanah, and I made it into the shofar. It was nicely polished, and at the end it was just solid. But let's just think about what these are used for. The kudu, the male kudu, has 2 long horns, heavy horns, and uses them to show dominance. And mankind, I think, has this also struggle for dominance. Whether they're the man has to show who is the wealthiest in the neighborhood, right? Who has the nicest car, nicest sports car, the nicest house, the biggest pool.
Yeah.
It's not just that. Sometimes maybe women will try to dominate. Who's the prettiest woman? And who's the manager that's worthy of the CEO's attention? We're all on this sort of day-to-day struggle of showing dominance over others, and that's essentially what the horn represents. Because the alpha male, right? Here, this is a ram's horn as well. The ram with the biggest horns, with the strongest horns, and whoever used them the best, will be able to dominate over all the other rams. And then obviously we'll be able to win the attention of the females and to procreate and to to continue his legacy. It's all about himself.
Right.
He's thinking about dominance over others. Here we have gazelle horns as well. But what do we do to make a shofar? How do we do it? And the answer is, you take that horn that's used to dominate and you hollow it out. Okay, this is the bone that comes inside the gazelle horn. I found this on a run nearby, and from the skull that I found, there are 2 horns. One of them I made a gazelle shofar. People typically do not use gazelle shofar, but it's you can use it. According to our Jewish law, we are allowed to use any kosher animal.
So any clean animal, yeah.
Any clean animal except for one. You know which one?
The cow?
The cow. We don't use the cow. Why don't we use the cow horn?
I don't know.
Well, here we're talking about all sorts of ideas when we blow the shofar. We want to we prefer using the ram's horn. Why the ram's horn? Because this reminds us of another ram.
Right.
If we were to use a cow's horn, we're afraid that's going to remind us of another cow. The sin of the golden calf.
The golden calf. Interesting.
And it would be interesting for me to try to make a shofar out of a cow's horn just to hear how it sounds, but obviously not to use it on Rosh Hashanah.
I wonder what everyone would think. You know, I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah. So this collection was really born accidentally. I was running and I found a goat's carcass, and I pulled on the horn just to see if I could get it off, and it came off. And I said, okay, this is an opportunity for me to make a shofar. So it really started with this. After learning how to blow the shofar with this one, that I learned when I was in the army, because I knew I was going to be on an army base. I need to blow the shofar there, so I learned how to blow the shofar. And then from this horn, I then found some gazelle horns, got my hands on some ram's horns, and then obviously the kudu horn, which is probably the prize member of the collection, just because of its size and its tremendous.
Definitely to your dominance point. It dominates the rest of them.
Look, we're talking about when the animal has this on, the kudu, right, which is a type of antelope. We're talking about 2 horns that are this size, that are filled with a bone. It's 10 pounds of horn. Yeah. It's a huge thing that it's carrying around on its head. It's a lot of energy. But these animals have developed so that this is what they use, and they grow them big and strong. And you could even see this one has some damage on it because it took some hits.
It was used.
It was used, exactly. Yeah. This kudu was not sitting back and relaxing and, munching on grass. Yeah. He was trying to dominate.
So help me understand the connection then. You mentioned about them taking dominance.
So what are we doing?
Why that instead of a trumpet? Because you're saying...
Yeah, what are we doing here? We're taking this and we're hollowing it out, and we're saying, look, we're not interested in that. We're not interested in dominating our fellow person. What we're interested in is proclaiming God's name and proclaiming God's kingdom, just with the hollow horn, disconnected, and saying, this is the blast that reminds us of the creation of the world. Yeah. It reminds us of the brokenness that the world can come to, but also the fixing that we can bring the world to. And that the second blast, and in fact, a part of our shofar blowing, maybe I should demonstrate it.
Yeah.
But part of our shofar blowing starts with the tkiyah, and it has the truah in the middle, which is a broken blast. And when we finish the set of blowing, then we do what's called a tkiyah gedolah, a large tkiyah, a very long one. And a lot of people try to lengthen it for a long time. I sometimes try to get in 30 seconds of blast if I can. Yeah. And what's the idea? The idea is the fixing, the one pure sound at the end is going to be much greater than the beginning, because it's when God created the world, it was just God and nothing else. Yeah. And now we're going to proclaim oneness of God in the whole world, and the whole world is fixed. And that's what we're thinking about at the blast of the tkiyah gedolah, of the large tkiyah.
I think there's something about the sound of the shofar that is transcendent. I remember the first time I ever heard a shofar, and it was not in anything related to, well, I say not anything related to Jewish custom, but it was not anybody Jewish. It happened at a church, a very large church gathering. But it's funny because I don't remember the first of a lot of things that weren't significant to me at the time. I wouldn't say at the time that I was like, oh, cool, somebody's going to blow the shofar, right? Whereas today, we've even I've personally gone and blown the shofar at certain things for events and things to commemorate certain things. And but I remember that first time. because there's something about that sound that I was like, I mean, like something alerted. I don't even know how to describe it. Like there's a, you called it, you said something like awaken.
Awakening, yeah.
Right. Like it flipped on a switch that like, I was like, man, what's that sound? You know what I mean? Cause
Right, and it's something that we can't even express in words.
right.
Right.
I'm having trouble right now.
In other words, what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, look, God, we proclaim your kingdom, and we try to do this with words, but words are just not sufficient.
Yeah.
We just need something else to do it, to be able to proclaim this. And it's something so simple, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to have a factory
Sure.
to make it.
Yeah.
We'll do a sample blast.
Yeah. I want to hear some different
tekiah.
shofars. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do first I guess we could start with the beginning of my collection. You could hear, just based on their size, that they sound different. This is the goat shofar.
Yeah. And so that was tekiah, teruah was the three in the middle, and then what would be a
And then
tekiah
tekiah at the end.
at the end.
Yeah.
right.
This is a very high-pitched sound just because it's small.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
like a
It would be the kazoo of the shofar
the
world.
kazoo, exactly.
I got it.
It's good. It's a pocket shofar. If I ever am in a place where I need to.
Yeah, I'm in a bind. I need a shofar. Like, and that was a goat.
This was a goat. Yeah, this is the first in my collection. And when the middle blast, we call it also a shavarim, just to make things complicated. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Shavarim is the 3-member blast. You heard 3. And we call the 9 really broken blast a truah. I'll try the truah now, but with a gazelle horn.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
And it will also be surrounded. Here.
So that's that more broken blast that you're referring to with the 9.
Yeah. Yeah. And then with the ram's horn, I could take the ram's horn and we'll do the combination.
Okay.
Which is first tekiah, then shavarim truah, 3, 9,
Oh.
and then 1.
okay.
One solid
All
blast.
right. Yeah.
And we could also try to do a tekiah gdola, like a long tekiah, and think about that idea of the fixing and the shofar of the redemption.
I mean, there's so much built into the shofar blast. I'm just, it's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Should we do the kudu?
Sure. Yeah. Let's do it.
Catch my breath again.
Yeah. Now that's a much deeper sound.
Yeah, much deeper sound. It's a pleasant sound also.
Yeah, for sure.
I like it.
Now I've there's some shofars that I've heard that people do because you can do multiple tones with the same shofar, like a different note, right? And 2 or 3 notes. Is there any application for that within?
Yeah, so I follow the Ashkenazic custom,
Okay.
but the Yemenite custom, a lot of times they'll use a kudu or a kudu-like horn, antelope type horn, longer horn. And I guess the Yemenite community they were in a position where they were trading with Africa.
Oh,
And they
okay.
had access to these types of animals. Maybe even in the Arabian Peninsula, there were these animals that lived, and that was their custom to blow this sort of shofar. But in addition to that, their blasts sound a little bit differently. Interestingly enough, the rabbi who taught me how to, before I went into the army for Rosh Hashanah, I had asked this rabbi who I knew, and he was an expert at blowing shofar. And he taught me. And he's actually from the Yemenite community, which is one of the smaller communities in Israel, least represented communities.
Sure.
But they have very interesting customs. So their customs themselves, they actually have like a little modification where the tone goes up a little bit. It goes ooh, ooh, like that.
Oh, yeah.
I can't even reproduce it because I don't know exactly how it works. But for us, it's more monotonous. We try to keep a steady pitch.
Yeah, the pitch.
The pitch is the same, but we just break it up. And in fact, when if listeners are out there listening about how to blow a shofar, it doesn't really require a lot of effort. You're not blowing really hard.
Sure.
A lot of it is the lips. You just have to control the flow of air. And when you're breaking up the sound, it's just you're blocking the airflow with your tongue. Your tongue is essentially going in front of the air hole that your lips are making in front of the shofar. So
Right.
That's the technique. And I think I had a good teacher, so I keep practicing. I still have to practice every year leading up to Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
So, but I'm excited. I'm excited that I have this privilege to be able to be the one who's, at least in our prayer group, the early morning prayer group, we start before sunrise.
Oh, wow.
And we time the prayers so that we say the Shema prayer right before sunrise, and we start the Amidah, the Shmona Esrei prayer, supplication prayer, right after sunrise. So we time that perfectly, and then the shofar blasts are going to be a little bit after that.
Man, what I'm impressed with is just the amount of thought and effort that goes into it. And there's something like, God, how can we honor you in the most excellent way? And I think that there's, because I would say that within Christendom, right, there's even amongst each other with different denominations, like they're looking at each other as legalistic, or this group's legalistic, or this group is too free, or this or that, right? Mm-hmm. And rather than finding out why, you know what I mean? I think maybe that sometimes you just got to sit across this table and listen to the why, and then that answers a lot of the questions. One of the questions I had was just listening to you talk about the Yemenite custom. It sounds like there's different customs amongst different groups of Jewish people. Is there a right or a wrong way, or do one group see it as the right way or the wrong way? Or
I think that every group sees their way as the way that's right for them.
Okay.
But at the same time, I would be very happy if, I have 5 daughters. So if one of them were to marry, or if all of them were to marry Yemenites and to start taking upon themselves those customs of the Yemenites, I'd be very happy,
Okay, cool.
Because every person is meant to follow in the custom of their community. And the Yemenite community was so set apart from the rest of the Jewish communities of the world, to a point that they didn't have a lot of the traditions that other Jews had, or they had different traditions. And, everyone has their own, I guess, aside from Jewish law traditions, they have their own cuisine, have their own, and that has evolved to sort of a cultural aspect of their community, which I obviously appreciate. I like the food of the other Jewish communities as well. And we believe also that if I am praying and there's a Yemenite synagogue, I'll fulfill my obligation by going to that synagogue.
Sure.
I'm not going to stay at home. If I'm in a town that this is the only synagogue is a Yemenite or a Sephardic synagogue, I'm definitely going to go. I'm going to participate as much as I can, try to follow along as much as I can, even though 90% is going to be the same.
Sure.
There's going to be a few percent that's different depending on the community, depending on the prayers. And what's interesting about our community here in Har Bracha, since you're already on the topic of different customs, is that during the week, our prayers don't have a set flavor to them. In other words, if the person who decides to lead is from the Ashkenazi community, like me, he'll say the Ashkenazic prayers.
Okay.
If someone is from the Sephardic community, he'll say the Sephardic prayers. So why is that in our community? Because we started off as a really small community. On Shabbat, there's enough there. We have the luxury now. The community is big enough that we can split off into different prayer groups and synagogues.
Okay.
But during the week, there's the 6 o'clock morning prayer. There's a 6:30 morning prayer. There's 7, the 7:30, and it's not broken down into the level of, oh, this is going to be the Yemenite prayer, and this is going to be why? Because there's so much similarity.
Sure.
So I'm happy. I feel comfortable when there's a Sephardic or Yemenite cantor who's leading the prayers. I know there's going to be a little variation, but I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah.
I already become accustomed to it.
Yeah.
And even though I grew up where every prayer would be the Ashkenazic prayer, I think most of American Jewry is from the Ashkenazic community, which sort of makes sense, historically. People that fled from Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, these are people typically from the Ashkenazi families, from Ashkenazi communities, and they set up those same sort of communities in North America.
Well, it almost seems like, the benefit that you mentioned of being here during the week and the weekly prayers, that might change it up a little bit.
Exactly.
What I mean?
It changes it up a little bit. And
keeps you on your toes.
At first, when I came here, I was like, wow, I was so not familiar with Yemenite prayers because I'd never really heard it before. But now I'm like, yeah, this is okay. I get it. The pronunciation is a bit different. The tunes are a bit different. And on Shabbat, people really want to educate their kids in that tradition. So now we have the community is big enough that we have that luxury.
Right.
That everyone can have their own type of prayers, and that way their children follow in their traditions. Maybe one day this whole idea of different communities among the Jewish people will fall a little bit.
Dissolve,
It will dissolve, and everyone will get one standard custom. But at this point, I think it's nice. It's just, we're all praying to the same God.
Sure.
We're all saying basically the same prayers, and we're not, God forbid, invalidating others and eliminating others. And everyone has their own way to express their prayers to God.
Right, and truly it's more just cultural differences. Like some will say this prayer first, or they'll say this the longer version of this one. It's some things like that.
Yeah,
it's minor differences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. In other words, our text of the Shema is going to be the same.
Right.
That's the essence of the essential prayers are going to be very, very similar.
Sure. Okay. So back to kind of our core discussion. Elul, you mentioned the Anili Dodi, which I think that's fascinating how it's an acronym in Hebrew, because that's something that from a non-Hebrew speaking Christian perspective, we would just never even come up with on our own. We have no hope for it, right? So it's very cool to have thousands of years of Jewish commentaries and perspectives to bring to the table, so to speak, even. And then you come to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Teruah. First off, Rosh Hashanah meaning head of the year, right? And Yom Teruah meaning day of blowing. Why the two? And then why a Rosh Hashanah head of the year in the 7th month, right? Because it's a 7th month,
Okay,
right?
so the Talmud actually says, well, I'll answer that first, but the Talmud says that there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs, okay?
4 heads of the year.
There are 4 days which are considered Rosh Hashanah, okay? And it goes into distinction, one is the first day of Nisan, the first month. One is the first day of the 7th month. And each one has its own, there are 2 more, because you may know about the Rosh Hashanah for trees.
I've been to a Tu B'Shvat Seder when I came for pruning in 2020. And what an awesome experience that was.
Okay, good. So, why do there need to be 4 New Years? It's like, guys, get with the program. Why don't you just have one?
Yeah, it's a year. There's 1 year, one head of the year.
So I think the answer is as follows. As a patent attorney, I work with the patent office. They talk about the fiscal year, starting at a certain time. There's the tax year. You don't have to have, it's a cycle.
Sure.
You don't have to have the same starting point and the same ending point. And from astronomical standpoint, our years are based more or less on the relative position of the Earth vis-a-vis the sun.
Sure.
Okay? That's, Rosh Hashanah and the first of Nisan, the first of the first month, are going to be at relatively the same times. In fact, the Torah tells us Shmor et chodesh ha'aviv, v'asita pesach la'Hashem Elokecha. Keep the month of Aviv and make Passover for the Lord your God. What is Aviv? Chodesh ha'aviv, the month of the spring. Aviv is an actual biological term that refers to a specific term of ripeness of grain. Okay? In other words, spring is associated with this holiday, and we know spring has to be in this time. And how do we do that? Because we know the word chodesh. What does it mean? Chodesh means month. Chodesh, the word chodesh is a word that means new. It means chadash, same word, okay? New. It means new month. So it means new moon. So if you have a new moon-based calendar, how do you make sure that the first month is going to be in Aviv, in spring?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, which is the barley harvest, the grain.
It's the grain.
Right.
The grain has to be at a certain level of
grain ripeness.
Ripeness,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
You know. So the answer is as follows. We need to have a lunar calendar that's also a solar calendar, okay? And the way we do it is by, first of all, let me just emphasize what the problem is. Every lunar period, our rabbis teach us, what's the lunar period? Just to make it simple for people who aren't, astronomers. It's the time that it takes from the moon to go around the earth relative to the sun. It's basically what's called from conjunction to conjunction. There's going to be a sort of a plane that's made between Earth and the sun. And as the moon moves around the Earth, it has to go through that plane. That will happen it's not the same every single month. It differs from month to month. But on average, it happens every 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 sections of an hour, which each section of an hour is 1,080 parts of an hour. So roughly,
Wow.
We're going to get really geeky now. You're talking
Yeah.
to a guy who is into astronomy and into math.
Yeah.
44 minutes and a couple of seconds.
Yeah, okay.
So 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes is the amount of time that every month should be. How do we resolve that? Some months are 29 days, some are 30 days. About half and half, because
All right.
29 and a half days is the average time of a month.
Sure.
So now if you take 29 and a half and you multiply it by 12, you get to 354, okay? But
Okay.
we know, because let's say America and a lot of your listeners are familiar with the solar calendar, we know that the solar year, that means for the Earth to get from place to place, in the same place relative to space, right, relative to the stars,
Sure.
from year to year is 365 and a quarter days, roughly. Okay, why do I say roughly? This is why you have 365 days in a year,
Yeah.
except for those days that you have every 4 years. You have a leap day, right,
Right.
on the 29th of February, except for those days where you don't, like the year 2000, where you didn't have a leap year. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Why is that? Because it's not exactly 365 and a quarter. So now, believe it or not, the rabbis putting together the calendar roughly 2,000 years ago understood all this stuff that NASA has verified is, okay, these are indeed the amount of, this is the amount of time that it takes for the moon to make this revolution around. Now, they understood that, even before then, before our modern calendar was made, they understood that we have an extra 11 days we need to fit in somewhere. So roughly every 3 years, we have 33 days of difference between the solar calendar and the lunar calendar. So let's add in another additional month.
Got it.
Okay, this is
Okay.
the source of the 13th month, what's now known as the second month of Adar, the month that's before the first month. Okay,
Right.
and that's going to happen according to today's calendar. It's going to happen roughly every 3 years, but sometimes it's going to happen every 2 years. Why? Because if every month is 29 and a half days, and I'm
Right,
adding
I
every
see.
3 years, it's really not going to be.
Then you got
enough.
2 or 3 extra days
We have
there
a few
on
extra
the.
days. So
I got it.
bottom line is, in our calendar, we have a 19-year cycle. And out of those 19 years, 7 years are leap years that will have 13 months.
Wow.
And the rest, 12 years, will have only 12 months. So that's our current calendar now. And that's how the sun keeps up with the moon. But let's go back to your original question.
Right.
Which is, remind me.
No. I was talking about with Rosh Hashanah. You have Rosh Hashanah and Yom Teruah, but
Yeah.
Rosh Hashanah is in the 7th month. Or at
So-
least
so-
at least the I think most people are familiar with the Rosh Hashanah that happens in the 7th month. You mentioned
Exactly.
there's 4 of them.
Exactly. There
I
are
don't
4.
think most people are familiar with those.
Correct.
Yeah.
And when we say Rosh Hashanah, typically we're referring to this month, which coincides with Yom Teruah. Okay.
Right.
Yom Teruah is the biblical name, and Rosh Hashanah is the rabbinic name of this day.
Yeah. Okay.
Because in our prayers, we're also commemorating the creation of the world. We're not just commemorating the fact that the Torah says you should have Yom Teruah and that you should blast the shofar. We're also connecting that blast of the shofar with the concept of the new year and the creation of the world and the reckoning, and proclaiming that God is king in the anniversary of his creation of man.
Okay, so this is interesting. So then in Exodus 19, God blows the shofar, or there's a voice of God that we hear, right? The sound of a trumpet. I guess different translations I've seen, which I'm sure you'll have a better translation than me, or not a translation. So he blows the shofar. And I guess there's this connotation there that it's the sound of the voice of God. And you're mentioning blowing the shofar at the time of creation, the commemoration of creation. Is there a connection there with it being God spoke the universe into existence at creation, between the tradition of blowing the shofar? I guess Yom Teruah is Yom Teruah, right? It's the day of blowing, so that's where that tradition comes from. But anyways, maybe you understand, pick up the pieces of what I just...
When you're talking about Exodus 19, you're talking about Mount Sinai.
Right.
So Mount Sinai is a very special time. In other words, our rabbis teach us about Mount Sinai is that the whole world was essentially created and waiting, not fulfilled until this time.
Oh, okay.
Because the world was created for the Torah to be revealed in it. Okay? Which is a kind of a deep concept.
Yeah.
Because you have, the thousands of years according to the biblical accounts, the billions of years according to the account of modern science.
Yeah.
That the world was in existence, but was sort of lacking something to make it complete.
Right,
okay?
right.
So you have this idea of, okay, if the people of Israel really need to accept the Torah now, because if not, the whole purpose of the world is going to be in vain. What's going to happen to the whole plan of creation? And if we understand the idea of creation of man, of God's real kindness to the world, being able to make man different than animal. What makes man different than animal? Animal is only worried about his survival, about his moving forward and his dominating. Okay?
Right.
That's what this horn represents when it's connected.
Right.
Once it's detached, it represents something else, right? But once it's connected, it represents the animalistic desire and drive. There's nothing deeper than that. And comes along man, and God says, you are here to preserve the world, to fix the world, to elevate the world, to make the second shofar blast, right? The first shofar blast existed. The world became into this existence of multiplicity, of confusion, of physicality, of drives, of desires, of animalistic tendencies. You, man, are here to elevate it, to bring it back up, almost like a parabola, right? It starts up really high, goes down really low, but then continues up again. But once it continues up, it can even get to a higher level than before. Why? Because from the before the creation, God is a creator in potential.
Yeah.
After the creation, God is a creator.
Sure.
And that's what we're doing. We're saying we're proclaiming God's kingdom in the world, fulfilling the essence of the purpose of creation. Saying, and that's connected into Mount Sinai. Because the shofar blast is at Mount Sinai, saying essentially, this is the blast proclaiming God is king in the background of Mount Sinai. Why? Because this is the essence of the creation. Going back to the creation, right now here we're at a high point after creation. We have the potential now to continue to continue. Maybe that's the explanation. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it so much, but this is just what comes to mind.
Yeah, and we could do this all night, I think. So I think as we're trying to wrap up, there's an idea with there's two things here, because we have Yom Teruah, Rosh Hashanah, and then we have Yom Kippur. And at Rosh Hashanah, you mentioned this is like a judgment day. And during Elul, I don't know if I mentioned this during this conversation, but there's this idea that the king is in the field, right? That he's more accessible during the month of Elul, leading up to Rosh Hashanah.
Mm-hmm.
But then at Rosh Hashanah, my understanding is that now if it's a judgment day, there's full protocol is now in effect, that he sits on the throne and there has to be a petition before you can come before him, right? So so you have Rosh Hashanah and then you have Yom Kippur, but there's this 10 days in between.
Mm-hmm.
So help me understand the essence of this what they call 10 days of awe, right? From Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur.
Yeah, so interestingly, you're reminding me of what the Talmud says about this concept, who is judged on Rosh Hashanah, and how does this judgment happen? And essentially, the whole world, like we said before, passes before God and is judged one by one, every individual. Some are judged favorably, some are not. But in any case, the judgment begins, the decision is given on Yom Kippur, and we have this 10 essential days where we call Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the 10 days of Tshuva.
Okay.
Where the judgment has already started. Okay, we're in between,
Yeah.
and those who are completely righteous, they're already okay. Those who are completely wicked, they're already judged.
Right. Okay.
Everyone else, right, which we assume that we are, right, that most of us are.
The in-betweens, yeah.
It's hard for us to understand that we're completely righteous or completely wicked.
Yeah. Interesting.
And everyone else is just waiting for that process to be completed. And that process finishes on the very end of Yom Kippur.
Wow.
Which is
Okay.
the signing of the judgment. And then our year is basically determined based on that.
Got it. Okay. And there's this also concept that the books are opened on Rosh Hashanah
Exactly.
and the books are closed on Yom Kippur. What is the book? What is this book?
So we're talking about the books of life, right?
Okay.
The books of life. Who will continue? And I think it's really a figurative sort of idea. What has a person accomplished over the year, and has he fulfilled his purpose? Has he really used his potential that God gave him? Has he fulfilled that potential over the course of the year? And what will be his potential for next year? Will he continue to have potential? Will he be able to fix more for next year?
Yeah. Wow. Incredible. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I'm just
My pleasure.
I really enjoyed this time.
And just a word to you and to your listeners.
Sure.
If anyone has a shofar or a horn that they want made into a shofar and to add to this collection, I'd be more than happy. I might even pay postage for it, to get it sent to me. Just because I'm doing this for educational purposes. I don't sell any shofar, and I've just given this presentation so many times to schools and to volunteers coming here to Israel, talking about shofar, educating people about shofar, and I hope that I'm limited here. I only have 4 different species. Hopefully, maybe one day I'll take a trip to Africa and pick up as many horns of different exotic kosher species as I can.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there you go. So if you've got horns or access to horns of clean, right, biblically clean animals, you can find that information in Leviticus 11 if you're confused.
Right.
But
split hooves
and choose the cud. Yeah.
One thing we didn't talk about is the cow. I don't have a cow representative here, but it would be interesting to hear. It probably would make a nice sound. You could take a nice longhorn, make out of it a shofar.
Yeah. But if you have one and you want to reach out to me, I can get that information over to Avraham. My email is ryan@topraise.net, RYAN @topraise, TOPRAISE.net. Thank you again so much for being here. I'll put any information or any links or anything that you'd like me to do in the description for anybody to reach out. But other than that, bless you guys and have a great week.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.